We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the traditional land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual and life-giving relationship to this land. We seek to honor the living traditions of the Abenaki people, and we humbly hope to learn from them how we may better live in harmony with the land and our fellow humans.
Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to CVUUS, the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society's online Sunday service. At this turning time of the year, the last day of Rosh Hashanah, the turning from one year to the next in the Jewish tradition, the turning this coming Tuesday, when we in the Northern Hemisphere officially move from summer to autumn, when the sunrise occurs later and the night begins to fall earlier each evening. My name is Becky Strum. I'm a member of this congregation, and today I will be one of two worship associates for our settled minister, the Reverend Barnaby Feeder. Joining me today for her first time as worship associate is Julia Chant. Julia moved with her family to Cornwall from Central Connecticut in August of 2016. She has two children, Lane, who is a sophomore at Middlebury Union High School, and Clara, who is in the 8th grade at MUMS. Julia is a small animal veterinarian in Pulteney, Vermont. The Chants have been attending services at CVUUS intermittently since 2017, but she was finally able to attend new UU classes this spring after work hours were cut back due to COVID-19. And we are so thrilled that she is also able to join our worship team. So if this is your first time online, please stay. We have a virtual Zoom coffee hour. If you're on Zoom, you just stay where you are. If you're not, if you're on the YouTube channel, you'll get some instructions as to how to change. If you are new, please do email us on our website so that we can share more about CVUUS in our weekly Wednesday email blast. Also, folks, if you have a milestone or passage to share, put it in the chat if you haven't already sent it to Reverend Barnaby. So the best way to stay in touch with all of the activities going on at CVUUS, even in these socially distanced times, is to read that weekly Wednesday email blast. That's why, if you're new, please let us know so we can send you one. If you want to meet in person at CVUUS in a group of under 10, contact Laura. Contact Shannon LaRose if you're interested in the coffee house that's in the works for October. Contact Bobby Loney to find out how Crop Walk will happen this year. This year, due to the pandemic, there is an increased need for food and resources here in Addison County in Vermont and around the world. See the blast for additional ways to make connections. Our call to worship today is On Turning by Jack Reimer. Julia and I will be sharing the call to worship. Now is the time for turning.
The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange.
The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south.
The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter.
For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively.
But for us, turning does not come so easily.
It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits.
It means admitting that we have been wrong, and this is never easy.
It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful.
It means saying, I'm sorry.
It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do.
But unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways.
God, help us to turn. From callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith.
Turn us around, O God, and bring us back towards you.
Revive our lives as at the beginning.
And turn us towards each other, God, for in isolation there is no life.
We will now light the flaming chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Please join me in the reading the words when you see them scroll down your screen. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace.
Good morning. So I know it's only September 20th, but I'd like to talk about Halloween for a moment. In our house, there is a rule that you cannot put Halloween decorations up until the beginning of October, despite what some people in the house may want to do. We also used to say that we wouldn't buy stuff for a costume until October because things changed so many times. We ended up building like 20 different costumes. And with Halloween, one of the costumes that is like been popular forever since I was a kid, since probably all of you were kids, is superheroes. I want to show you one of my favorite superhero costumes. So this is Stella dressed as Ruth Bader Ginsburg for Halloween. I don't know if this was last year or a year before. And you might think it's funny to think of it as a superhero, but here's what I'm thinking. A superhero is somebody who has special powers that everybody doesn't have, and they use them for good to help make the world better. And I definitely think that that is what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did. As many of you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on Friday. She was 87 and had been sick with cancer for a while. She was a judge on the Supreme Court, which is the biggest court in our country. And she was someone who her whole life as a lawyer and judge fought for justice and equality and to make the world better for people. And when I found out on Friday that she had died, I just felt so sad, as many people did. She was someone that was very beloved and really well respected because of the work she did. And you can't ever replace a person who dies, but there are things that you can do to keep their memory alive and to honor them. And I think one of the most important things is to look at what they were doing in their life and try to keep that work going in memory of them. So for us, that means that we need to keep fighting for justice and equality like she did. And all of us can do that. It doesn't matter how old we are. All of us can do that. All of you can do that, even if it's in small little ways right now. You know, she ended up being a superhero, but she didn't start that way. Like so many superhero stories, she just started like a normal kid. So this is her when she's 2. And this is her at age 13. So she was just a normal kid. She grew up in Brooklyn. she said when she talked about her family and how she grew up that she didn't feel like she really grew up with anything special, but that she was encouraged by her family to really be herself and to stand up for equality and to read a lot. This is her with a cousin just skiing, right? Just a normal kid, like all of you kids out there with high school friends. In this last picture, I love this because this actually reminds me of some things that we do here at CVUUS. She's 15 in this photo. I know she looks like she's 25. This is at a Jewish summer camp when she was giving a sermon. And to me, it reminds me of times when children and youth get up at our services and do worship or speak or do readings. Kind of reminds me of the coming of age services we do every other year in the spring, where people get up and talk. So she was just a kid, right? Just a normal person. And so how was it that she ended up doing all the things that she did? And how did she end up being a Supreme Court justice? The answer is that she really followed her heart, and she was super, super determined. You know, her whole adult life, she kept trying to do things or get jobs as law clerks or lawyers, and was often told no. And the reason she was usually told no was that she was a woman. In law school, out of 500 people, she was one of 9 women. But she kept doing it anyway, right? And even when she was told no, she kept going. She talked a lot about this, about being told no and doing it anyway. And she used to say that her advice for kids was that when you're told no about something that really matters to you, that you know should be happening, or that you know you need to be doing, you should stick to it and keep going. And I really want the kids to hear this, because I'm too old to be a Supreme Court justice now, as most of the people watching this probably are, but you are not. You might not end up being a Supreme Court justice, but you really have the power to end up being a superhero or doing big, important things or small, important things. And it's just step by step. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that real change, enduring change, and the word enduring means change that lasts. So real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. And she felt like that was kind of what happened in her life. She just kept doing the next thing. She didn't have a plan like, I'm going to be a Supreme Court justice when I grow up. That was just the next thing that made sense. She also said, fight for things that you care about. Stand up for equality, and read a lot, like she had been raised with. And fight for things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So this week, I hope that all of you will really be yourselves and realize that that is enough and that is wonderful, that you'll stand up for equality, and that you'll read a lot. May her memory be a blessing and lead us to take action. So now I'd like to introduce Ethan Spreitzer on piano. He has a piece that he was supposed to do last week, but we couldn't make it work. So I'm thrilled to have him again. Here's someone who's on his way to being a piano superhero. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Ethan. And now the congregation can see why we delayed this a week to make sure that we could get the production beautiful and correct, make it worthy of that incredible talent that he shared with us. I'm Reverend Barnaby Feeder, if you're visiting us for the first time, and it's my pleasure today to introduce our offering, our weekly offering, where we share our financial resources with some organization that's doing work that represents our values in the wider world. And for this month, that organization has been the Movement Voter Project. Now, I won't talk a lot about the project, but I'll lead you into it by telling a story that occurred in our family when my son Linus was 8 and Maddie was 6. Maddie was very competitive with Linus, and she wanted to do a lot of what she was doing, but she always wanted to do it her way. We were living in Chicago at the time, so when Linus became a rabid Chicago Cubs fan, Maddie plunged into baseball, but she did it her own way. She announced she's rooting for the Birds. And I said, "What Birds?" She said, "All of the birds, the Orioles, the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, all of them." I said, "What about the Angels? They have wings." She said, "No, just the birds." Well, Movement Voter Project is about that. It supports hundreds of local community groups that are working to fight voter suppression. It's donating to Movement Voter Project as a way to support all of the birds of hope for democracy. And I invite you to be as generous as you're able. This is the portion of our service where we celebrate and acknowledge milestones and passages in the lives of the congregation and the wider world. I want to start by saying it's been a week of horrors in the West related to fire and on the Gulf Coast related to hurricane. I've heard from many of you about contacts with friends and relatives, more than we can acknowledge in this space. I want to add to this, though, the added pain we feel in President Trump refusing to acknowledge any connection to climate change in all of this. So this is a week that we pass through with suffering, and we don't want to rush right by acknowledging that. We will be entering a time of silent prayer and meditation, a time that we leave in each service for people to be in touch with what's on their hearts if they have milestones or passages that they didn't get around to sharing with us or decided not to share with us for one reason or another. We will come out of that with a choir piece written by Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs called A Litany of Atonement. Mitch Kramer will be reading the lyrics. The choir will be singing the response. before we go into the silence, I want to lead you in with an affirmation written for 6 to 12-year-old children attending a UU summer camp created by the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, California in 2003. It goes like this. It's a blessing we were born, and it matters what we do. What we know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do. We don't have to do it alone.
For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in
for losing sight of our unity.
We forget ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forget ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
I keep looking for one more teacher, only to find that fish learn from water and birds learn from sky. If you want to learn about the sea, it helps to be at sea. If you want to learn about compassion, it helps to be in love. If you want to learn about healing, it helps to know of suffering. The strong live in the storm without worshiping the storm.
I'm talking about forgiveness today, and I have to start by asking for forgiveness for saying that it was Mitch reading the responses of the choir when it was actually Larry Vanderberg. Thank you, Larry, for that reading. I talk about forgiveness every year and at some point during the Jewish High Holy Days. This 10-day period starts with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and ends with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It gives me the joyful opportunity to bring to you time-tested wisdom about how we nurture our better angels. And that fills me with gratitude. But this Sunday, I come before you with a deep, deep sadness and anxiety that is hard to bear. I don't know the exact time of death Friday of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It was, I believe, a very short time before sunset in Washington, D.C. For those of you who see her passing only as a political disaster, the specific hour means nothing. But for anyone open to seeing the world spiritually, there is a deeper message begging for our attention. You see, the High Holy Days end with Jews gathering at worship services to seek God's forgiveness for their failures to live up to their religion's teachings. They pray God will inscribe them in the book of life before he closes it at the end of Yom Kippur. Having your name written into this book is about more than remaining alive physically in the new year. It affirms that you are spiritually alive. That only happens, according to the Bible, to those who actively choose life over death by seeking to live righteously. In modern non-biblical UU terms, a better way to say this might be that Jews are praying for right relationship with the spirit of life-giving love and love-giving life. But here's the brilliant part. There's a tradition that each Jew is called to first attend to their role in the sins of the world. Only then can one approach God, seeking inscription in the book of life for another year. They have the days between Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year, and Yom Kippur to ask forgiveness from the people they have wronged. And they are also charged with forgiving all who seek forgiveness from them, sometimes an even harder task. These days, many Jews also explicitly address the harm they have caused to non-human living things and environmental abuse of the earth itself. This brilliant communal insight that the pathway to a God worthy of worship must run through first repairing damaged human relations never fails to blow me away. Not surprisingly, Jews have thought a lot about what it might mean to have the opportunity to take up that annual forgiveness challenge snatched away on the eve of a new year. The most loving take on it was voiced yesterday in a tweet by Nina Totenberg, the NPR legal affairs correspondent and close friend of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A Jewish teaching says those who die just before the Jewish New Year are the ones God has held back until the last moment because they were needed the most and were the most righteous. Now that suggests a God who doesn't think the next 6 months are when we needed Justice Ginsburg the most. And I can't really begin to figure out the rationale for that. So what is my work for and with you this morning? There is a Jewish prayer for the dead that says, Zichrona livracha, may their memory be for a blessing. Our work is to imagine the blessing in all of this and then to bring it to life. Poppy spoke to this point in her Time for All Ages. And what I want to give you to hang on to this morning is a little more complicated. As our reading from the poet Mark Nepos says, the strong live in the storm without worshiping the storm. This death slams us in the face with a reminder we didn't need, that we are living in a storm. But let us avoid glorifying the storm and our vulnerability in a way that drops us to our knees in anger or despair. Let's focus on what we worship that empowers us, as our chalice lighting said, to bless and not to curse. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life as a Jew revolved around devotion to justice. That dedication is crystallized in a brief biblical command in the book of Deuteronomy that was on display in her office in different pieces of artwork. The Hebrew translates to justice, justice, pursue justice. I want to invite you to see that this is just one manifestation of devotion to love, love with a capital L. I'll start by reminding you how often we affirm Cornel West's claim that justice is what love looks like in public. It's fitting that Justice Ginsburg's death on the eve of Rosh Hashanah points us towards something love requires that laws, that justice in the courts can never provide: forgiveness. You've just heard the choir sing in response to a litany or a list of transgressions calling for forgiveness. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. But as Kamala Harris says so many times, it's beginning to drive me crazy. Here's the thing. I've always felt there was something troubling in this collectivist perspective on forgiveness. It reminds me of my favorite story featuring our son Linus. He was not yet 3 when I came home one night from a long day at the Times to find him waiting at the apartment door. Daddy, he said, do you want to read to me or play trains? He asked me this after I had picked him up and hugged him. I said, maybe a little wearily, I want to talk to mommy. That's not one of your choices, he told me. Indeed, love, whether it's that of our children, our partners, our elders, our community, or our gods, has a mind of its own filled with contradictions. And that's why these words by the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr are among the most often quoted readings in our hymnal. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our standpoint. Therefore, we must be saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. The final form of love is forgiveness. But as I see it, it's not one of our choices, at least at the moment we enter the front door into the places we call home, the places where our heart and soul reside. And Judaism, although it is the story of a people's relationship with their God, has always known this. That's why Judaism calls on every Jew individually to observe the new year by seeking forgiveness for past transgressions and current oppression of others, and by offering forgiveness to all who come seeking it from them. We can pray together and praise whatever in the universe makes love possible together, and look inwardly for connection to it together. We can even engage in acts of forgiveness together, but we must begin seeking and granting forgiveness as individuals. So when did the I part of forgiveness in Jewish tradition become the we in the Unitarian Universalist hymnals? I read up a bit and I discovered that the author of the litany, Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, had written it in the first person. It starts in his version, "For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. I forgive myself. I forgive you. We begin again in love." I emailed Rob to ask if we could chat about the change in wording. It was a natural step for a former reporter to take to find out what lay behind the truth I was dealing with, but it was easier because we sort of know each other. I went to high school with Jan, his wife and co-minister at their very large UU congregation in St. Paul, Minnesota, a connection I didn't recall until I encountered them at UU events on my way through seminary. Rob graciously got back to me quickly, and I was astonished to learn that I in this litany became we in our hymnal without Rob being consulted, much less approving of it. Rob was raised Jewish and is still deeply connected to that heritage. He told me the way the UUA has framed it takes everybody off the hook. It weakens it. Rob said that the St. Paul Church uses his original wording in a spoken rather than musical format. Typically, congregants have been asked ahead of whichever service these words are being used to think about who they need to approach for forgiveness. And during the service, congregants have sought and extended forgiveness to a spouse or other family members or friends, or in some cases, a stranger, one-to-one. It's made a lot of people uncomfortable, Rob said. To me, it sounded like good discomfort, in the sense that the late Congressman John Lewis urged us to move toward good trouble in our justice work. However, Rob has moved in recent years to having his congregants face each other across the center aisle instead of engaging in these one-to-one conversations. That creates a less intimate, but still direct relationship when saying, I forgive myself, I forgive you, we begin again in love. I couldn't help but ask toward the end of our conversation whether Rob's view of what these powerful words evoke for him has changed in the 20 plus years he's been using the litany. He noted with a laugh that early on, the Christian social justice activist, Reverend William Sloane Coffin, caught him off guard with the question, Rob, what makes you think it's in your power to forgive yourself? Yes. If that's the first step to beginning again in love, all of us need to make sure we have a good answer to that one. What makes us think it's in our power to forgive ourselves? But there's been a bigger change over the years for Rob, and I really relate to it, perhaps because we're almost the same age. It has to do with timing. The litany can feel like an invitation to rush to forgiveness in situations where the raw pain and grief of the transgression, indeed the horror of it, needs to remain alive in us or in our victims. In other words, love that addresses tough things, like our racial divisions, hurts even as it opens the door for healing. I think we are clearer than ever before that we can't wait for forgiveness to begin again in love. And sometimes the opportunity to seek forgiveness is lost. Loving critics of Justice Ginsburg have been saying for years that she should have resigned well before President Obama left office to give him a chance to appoint a younger, healthier successor. She usually silenced them with a question she knew had no answer. Who would be better? One can't help but wonder, though, had her final illness lingered into this year's High Holy Days, would she have asked for forgiveness for that justified pride? It has clearly further endangered so much of what she cared about. But what really matters is that we begin to repair the hole in our world she left through her greatness, and do so in the spirit of love of justice, love of compassion, and love of beauty. We can do that. And we'll take joy in such a struggle if it is grounded in love, in our relationship, to something larger than us that we name love with a capital L, or God, or spirit of life. We can make of her life a blessing. Some have suggested we can make of her life an overdue revolution. Either way, let us not leave ourselves as individuals or our congregation needing to seek forgiveness for failing this challenge. May I begin again in love. May we begin again in love. Blessed be, and amen. By way of benediction today, I want to return to that Hebrew phrase, Zikrona Livracha. Poppy said, may her memory be a blessing. I've often heard it translated, may her memory be for a blessing. And I think I like that second translation a little better, although both are equally correct. The Hebrew is sparse, and it literally means memory of her to blessing. So may her memory be a blessing. May her memory be for a blessing. The reason I like that latter phrase is that we can feel warmed by our memory and inspired by her memory, but I want us to feel empowered by her memory. May her memory be something that we use for a blessing to the world, that we become a blessing because of her memory. And I invite you to go forth this week and into the future in that spirit. Blessed be. Amen.